Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all having a wonderful day today. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the very often requested Vector Paragon 4X optic. But before we get into the video, if you'd like to help me out personally, you can, of course, like, share, and subscribe, as that is all free and it does help me out quite a bit. The biggest financial supporter of the channel is Aura. You can sign up for a 2-week free trial in the description and pinned comment down below. There's also my website, which does have a lot of uppers back in stock, and there's also Subscribestar, which is basically just a pro to a Patreon.
Also, big thanks to Callaway Ballistics for supplying most of the ammo in this video, and for Hunter's Point Shooting Complex for letting me come out and film.
And while you're here, go ahead and comment your favorite Prism in the comments down below. Now, full disclosure on the Vector 4X Paragon, they did send this out to me for review, so I did not pay for it whatsoever. On top of that, they have sent me a lot of optics to test, the Vector 1X, the 3X, and of course now the 4X Paragon, as well as many rifle scopes as well. I have 2 or 3 more in to test right now that I will eventually be doing videos on. So they have sent me a lot of product to review. On top of that, I do have a discount code for them. That is, I believe, Focus. It's like 10% off, but it is also 10% off and a 10% affiliate. I don't make any money off of that. I'm not worried about pushing affiliate links or discount codes or anything else like that. I believe they have better discount codes on their website anyways, but just in full disclosure, just know that there is a long-term relationship there, and they have sent me a lot of product to review. Now, getting into the Vector Paragon series of optics, this is their quote-unquote micro prism section. They're very small, lightweight, and so far have been very tough as well. I've done videos on the 1X and 3X optic, and they've both performed very, very well. Some of the best prism optics on the market. Keep in mind that they come in at a price tag of around $200, $250, so they're fairly inexpensive as well. Now, getting into specifics on the Vector Paragon 4X Prism, you have a very good size and weight, so it comes in at about 3 inches long with a weight of 8.8 ounces, which for a 4X optic is pretty small and very lightweight, one of the lightest 4X optics on the market. In terms of construction, it is just your standard aluminum body. It's probably 6061, 6063, something like that. Hard coat anodized, very simple. In terms of the mount itself, it does fortunately use standard T1, T2 style mounts. It does come with an absolute co-witness, and then it has a lower 1/3 riser plate. I'm just using it currently in the absolute co-witness, though you could put it at a lower 1/3 or with any aftermarket mount that you want to get it to whatever sort of height you desire. You of course have 2 crossbolts on here that are torqued down to 25 to 30 inch-pounds, whatever you think you're comfortable with on there. On the bottom, you do have an integrated recoil lug, which is very nice. That increases the surface area contact between the upper receiver and the mount itself. That just helps it to give it a hard stop during recoil and hopefully a little bit better zero holding abilities, less point of impact shift, so on and so forth. Overall, the mount design is very simple. You do have a large locking block on the other side that again gives you a good amount of clamping force and surface with the 2 crossbolts. You also have steel inserts on the locking block itself so that you're not going to strip it out quite as easily as if it were steel into aluminum. So you have steel into steel contact, which is very nice. So while the design is simple, it does everything that it needs to do and seems to work fairly well. Now, in terms of the body and controls, you of course have a 2032 battery tray on the right. You have exposed windage and elevation, though they are flush with the body, so you're not going to be accidentally adjusting them. The one downside about the adjustments is that they are in 1 MOA increments, which you might think is super imprecise. Keep in mind that gives you a maximum theoretical zero error of 0.7 MOA, and that's maximum possible. Realistically, you're going to be somewhere around a quarter to maybe a half MOA of zero error. Not really an issue whatsoever. It's not a problem. We took this optic all the way out to 600 yards without issues on this LWRC 12.7. It was not a problem. The 1 MOA clicks. There may be a slight downside. It might be slightly annoying to some people, but it doesn't matter whatsoever. If you miss a shot at distance, it's because you did something wrong, not because of some minor zero error. On the left-hand side of the optic body, we have our illumination controls. So you have 2 rubber buttons, a plus button and a minus button that do plus and minus things. You have 10 different illumination settings on the illuminated reticle. At max brightness, which is of course setting 10, at max brightness, it is what I would consider to be daylight bright. It is very easy to pick up even in full sunlight. So they did a good job on the LED emitter power itself. The refresh rate is not quite perfect, though I do want to say you might notice it in the GoPro footage more, is that it does seem to have a bit of a stutter under recoil. However, when you're actually using the optic, it's not something that your naked eye can pick up. That's more of an effect of the GoPro, though just know that the illumination refresh rate isn't quite perfect on it. But again, not really something that you'll ever notice unless you're throwing a GoPro or a camera behind it to catch it. So again, as far as the illumination goes, it's very good, very usable, even in full daylight situations. Keep in mind that it is still an etched reticle. So even if you don't like the illumination or the battery dies, because the battery life probably isn't going to be all that great, somewhere between 50 and 200 hours, depending on your desired brightness level. Keep in mind that with that etched reticle, even if the battery dies, you still have a very good aiming point, just minus the illumination. Now, as far as the rest of the body goes, we of course have a rear diopter for adjusting the reticle to your eyes, and on top, we have a red dot mounting system, which is exclusive to the 4X model. The 1X obviously doesn't really need a red dot on top. The 3X model doesn't have a red dot plate, but the 4X model has a large section on top for a red dot. Now, the pattern of the red dot mounting plate, they call it the mag mounting platform, but I believe it's RMS, so it uses decent red dots, and you can definitely find a lot of red dots that will accept this platform, and it does use all 4 posts. Unfortunately, my Holosun dots, because this is a true RMS platform, do not fit on here because the Holosun red dots don't have the back posts, I believe, and the 4 posts are a little bit too tall. So unless you wanted to modify the mounting platform, Holosun dots won't fit on here, which is a little bit unfortunate, but if you're using any red dots that use the true RMS mounting platform, they will match on here just fine, and having all 4 recoil bosses is very nice. So keep in mind that while this does have a red dot mounting system, I personally did not test it because I don't have any red dots that use this mounting platform, because all of my, pistol red dots are Holosun. Now, very interesting on the cover plate for the red dot mount, they have a machined section, kind of like a rear sight post, but I don't think a lot of people are going to be using some sort of front post. Maybe it's just some sort of emergency aiming solution or like a bit of a reference point, but it does have it on there. Not sure what you would use it for, but it is there just in case, I suppose. Now, getting into the most important aspects of the Vector Paragon 4X Prism, that is going to be the eye relief and eye box. How usable is the optic? Then it's going to be the field of view and the overall optical quality. How much do you see and how good is that image? And then, of course, the reticle, because that is what you're actually going to be aiming with. Can you use it at distance? Can you compensate for wind, auto ranging features, so on and so forth, to give you the overall package of actually using the optic? So starting with the eye relief and eye box, Vector states that you have 3 inches of eye relief. Now, 3 inches on a 4X prism is very good. So the eye relief is right at about 3 inches. You can get a little bit closer and a little bit further away and still get a very usable sight picture. So as far as eye relief goes on a 4X prism, that is actually very good. Now, your up, down, left, and right is tight, but again, still usable. So using it in odd positions, prone, around cover, barricades, whatnot, is definitely doable. It's not the most forgiving I've seen, but the eye box and eye relief is still in the very good category for a 4X prism. Now, moving into field of view and glass quality, field of view is rated at 28.8 feet at 100 yards, which is very good. That is, if you were to extrapolate that out to a 1X LPVO, that'd be about 115 feet, 116 feet, somewhere in that range. So that is in the very good category. Keep in mind that we're getting a very good field of view on top of a good eye box and eye relief, so it's not a terrible compromise in that regard. For some optics, you might get a fantastic field of view, but that eye relief and eye box really shortens up, meaning that overall it's harder to use. Now, talking about glass quality, it is fairly standard for Chinese optical quality. It's not fantastic. It doesn't look pristine like Japanese or German glass will, but for Chinese optical solutions, it is very good. It was very easy to take out to 600 yards to make very precise impacts for a 4X prism. Of course, the optical quality is good. It's bright. The image looks good. Their colors are good. The contrast is fine. Edge-to-edge clarity is actually very good. So keep in mind that talking about a cheap 4X prism optic, we have a good optical quality, very good field of view, and it's very usable with a very forgiving eye box and eye relief, keeping in mind the context of a 4x prism. Now, moving on to the reticle, this is something that Vector has kept very simple, but fortunately it gives you all of the information that you're going to need to get out to its intended use case of anywhere between 0 and 600 yards. So starting off, we have a center floating dot, very similar to a lot of other optics, and then we have a outer horseshoe to kind of draw your eye to the center. All of that is illuminated, so if you are going to be using it quickly, say inside of like 25 to 50 yards, it is very easy to pick up, put on targets, make decent hits. And then of course at longer distance, anywhere between 100 and 250 yards, where you're going to be using that center dot, it is still precise enough to put it exactly where you want. Now, I believe that this optic is set up for a 50-200 yard zero, which is exactly how I had it set up on this LWRC 12-7. So in between 200 yards, I would use the center dot, and then 3, 4, and 600 yards, I would start to use the rest of the BDC. Right underneath the floating dot, you have the first hash mark, which is of course going to be for 300 yards, and then you have 400 yards below that, and you also have the 5-mile-an-hour wind holds corresponding at 4, 5, and 600 yards. Now, I believe that it was set up for 55 or 62 grain like M193 or M855 out of a 16-inch barrel. I believe that's how they calculated it. So out of this 12-7, I was using 55 grain Callaway Ballistics reman, which they did send out to the channel. So big thanks to those guys. I believe I do have a discount code or some sort of code for them as well, probably in the pinned comment down below. But with that ammunition, it is on the weaker side, so we're dealing with reduced velocities. Keep in mind that we're also on a 12-7 versus a 14-5 or a 16. So at 400 yards, it was very close. I was bracketing the 5-mile-an-hour wind holds between 4 and 500 yards. And then at the 600-yard target, I was putting the 600-yard wind dot above the target and a little bit to the left to compensate for some of the extra drop and wind with just 55 grain reman to make hits at 600 yards.
Lights out at 400, good to know.
So the reticle wall, very simple. It does everything that it needs to do, and it is set up properly to get you from 0 all the way out to 600 yards with the appropriate gun and ammunition choice, of course. And it was surprisingly easy to make hits at 600 yards, given the fact that it is only a 4x optic, and 4x is pushing it for me personally at those quote-unquote extended ranges. However, everything works well. It is sized properly to be precise enough at distance, while still being quick to pick up at closer ranges, anything inside of like say 50 or 100 yards. It's still very quick to pick up the reticle and put it exactly where you want, combined with good illumination, good enough glass quality, very good field of view, and a very forgiving eye relief and eye box. Putting all of those things together means that the Vector Paragon 4X Prism was one of the best prisms that I've ever used, especially at distance. It is a little bit harder to use up close, but again, if you are combining that with either a offset red dot or a red dot mounted on top on their mounting system, you're going to have a package that is extremely lightweight and extremely capable. Even with an offset T1, T2 style red dot, you're looking at about maybe 13, 14 ounces total and maybe around 10 ounces total with a red dot, a mini red dot mounted on top. You have a extremely versatile package that is again very size and weight efficient. Now, the last thing that we need to talk about is durability. And durability is an area where the other two Vector Optics prisms that I've tested have done basically perfectly with the shoulder height drop onto an AR500 steel plate. So getting into the drop test that we did on the Paragon 4X prism, the first thing we do is, of course, a 5-round control group at 50 yards. Keep in mind that we're just using the 55 grain Callaway Ballistics reman, so it's not necessarily the most accurate or hot ammo out there. The 5-round control group at 50 yards looks just fine. We do a shoulder height drop onto dirt and rocks directly on top of the optic and do another 5-round group. After that, we experienced no shift in 0. The groups lined up over top of each other basically perfectly, no issues there. And then we go ahead and move on to our shoulder height drop onto an AR500 steel plate. Now, unfortunately, when I did the second drop the first time, I knocked the bipod with my hand, causing the gun to not land flush on top of the optic. And so it kind of landed weird on the side. So I didn't really want to count that as a full hit. So I did a second drop, so a third drop in total, 2 drops on the AR500 steel plate. So this isn't going to be an apples to apples comparison with the other two, because the other two just got a single drop on the AR500 steel plate. This one here got 2 drops, so you can't really compare and contrast, but just we can talk about how this one performed. And unfortunately, after 2 drops on an AR500 steel plate, because I messed up the first drop just by knocking the gun out of position, unfortunately, we did have a large point of impact shift. I believe it was like 6 or 7 inches up and to the left. And on top of that, the group size was very large, which was concerning, because if something is broken inside of the optic, that could mean that, you know, something is dead and wobbling or broken on the inside, so it can no longer even just hold a group. That would be a large problem. Now, I wanted to make sure that everything was fine, so I checked the mount, torqued down the mount a little bit more, make sure the suppressor didn't come loose, anything like that. Re-zeroed the optic. Fortunately, it was still able to hold the group, and I walked it back out to 600 yards.
All right. Now, just to confirm, 200 yards, 2 shots. Hit. Hit.
So again, after 2 of the hardest hits that an optic will probably ever experience, even theoretically, it did have a large point of impact shift. The optic didn't die, the mount didn't bend or anything else like that. It was able to be fixed and re-zeroed. Keep in mind that the Vector 1X and 3X didn't have any point of impact shift after a single shoulder height drop onto an AR500 steel plate. Could be a lot of variation. It's always a sample size of 1, different drops, different days, different guns that they're on. The Paragon 4X does have a little bit different design. It is a little bit bigger, longer, so maybe it is a little bit more prone to point of impact shift, though it didn't have any point of impact shift after the standard shoulder height drop just onto dirt and rocks, which is always a good sign. And of course, no cracking of the glass. The body is fine. It's scuffed up. It's dented in a few places, but other than that, it is just fine. So when it actually comes to using the Paragon 4X Prism, it is a fantastic optic to actually use. It was very fast, very intuitive, again, all the way out to 600 yards. It is incredibly size and weight efficient. The performance per dollar is probably the highest for any Prism on the market. Keep in mind that these are about $250 for a 4X Prism with a very good eye relief, eye box, field of view, glass quality. The Reticle does everything that you need it to do. Is it going to have the same glass quality and feature set as some much more expensive Prisms? No, of course not. A lot of the other Prisms, if you're comparing it to ACOGs or, you know, some of the other Steiner Prisms on the market or whatnot, they're going to have better glass quality, maybe a better feature set. But when it comes to size and weight, it's pretty hard to beat. When it comes to value, it might be impossible to beat. So while not a perfect optic, I think one of the main complaints that people are going to have is going to be that the adjustments could be a little bit finer, go from 1 MOA to half MOA. To me, it doesn't really matter. Again, I was able to take it out to 600 yards, no problem. I don't think I'm going to be taking it out any further than that. And at those distances, I don't think that it really matters as much as your personal skill level, knowing your ammunition, your holds, your gun at those distances is going to be much more important than a little bit coarser adjustments. But as far as that goes, the feature set is maybe not quite as perfect. It doesn't have quite all the features that other optics are going to have that are also going to be a little bit more expensive. The performance to dollar ratio, the performance to weight ratio is all very, very good, making the Vector Paragon 4X Prism one of the best on the market currently, especially if price is a factor for you. Now, there might be more meta reasons to support a company like Primary Arms over a company like Vector Optics, but when we just talk about the optic itself, it is a fantastic optic to use. If you're looking to save some money, it is a very good way to go. Again, if you're looking for a 4X Prism. But with all that out of the way, guys, let me know what you guys think of the Vector Paragon 4X Prism in the comments down below. And with all that out of the way, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. I will see you in the next one. Peace off.